So, you need to survive a master's thesis, right? There are a couple of traps that if you avoid these, then you are certainly going to have a more comfortable and less stressful experience. So, my first tip has to do with the choice of topic. Indeed, there are no reasons for you to take any major risks in a master's thesis. This is more something for a PhD thesis. I recommend going for rather modest objectives, which are going to be easier for you to work on and over deliver. This is going to serve you much better than to be overly ambitious and then fall short of your objectives. One way to think about this is that in a master's thesis, typically you can use a methodology, apply it to an object of study in a certain context. And among these three elements, you want one of them to be novel. Some of the advantages of doing it this way is, first of all, this is going to be a lot more manageable for you, but of course, that also means that you're going to have results that you can then very easily compare with what has already been done. So my second tip has to do with planning your research. So typically research has kind of three major parts. The first part is setting up your research. So that usually includes, for example, a literature review or some interviews. And this also includes setting up and defining a research question and your research objectives. The second part then is really where you are going to carry out most of your research. So that can mean, for example, doing experiments, doing an investigation or interviews. And then you have a third part in which you really want to basically type up everything you did. Try to estimate how much time you're going to need for each part. If you're really unsure, you can go for more or less a third, a third, a third. If needed, ask your professor to check your research plan with you before. One other thing that I recommend is including margins. So for example, in each part you want to allocate like an extra week. Plan to finish maybe 2 weeks before you actually have to submit your thesis. You are going to thank yourselves. There's always going to be a little bit of overlap between the different parts, and that's normal. But if you see that you do not have the outcome when planned, either speed up or try to find some help, talk with your professor, talk with your colleagues, ask them for some input, have your research objectives and research question defined before you start carrying out your experiments or designing. My third tip would be to work consistently. I recommend setting up about 3 hours per day on which you really focus, and I recommend really being diligent about this and doing that every day. You'd be surprised how much you can get done in 3 hours, and this really adds up over time. However, it is very difficult to just put in extra hours on a given day in order to compensate for what you have not done in the days prior. You need to take into consideration that really we can only concentrate so long. 3 hours is already quite a good time to concentrate. So it's easier to do that day after day a little bit rather than suddenly having like these big pushes where you try to do as much as possible. My fourth tip is to document well from day one. For example, learn to use source or citation management tools such as Mendeley or Zotero. You really want to avoid finding yourself in a situation where you cannot remember where this information comes from. One other thing that you really want to be careful to note down is each decision you take, why you took this decision, what assumptions you are using, and also Note down any insights you have. So if you have an idea of, for example, how to analyze some data that you have, note it down so that you can come back to that. Finally, one thing that is very important, please work on the cloud. It happens so often that the computer crashes or some sort of work is accidentally destroyed. For the lucky ones, this might be a week before you have to submit. For the unlucky ones, it's the day before. Protect yourself from this. If you are working on something physical, take pictures regularly. If you are working on a text or images, be sure to work on the cloud and save them regularly. I went 3 weeks to Ivory Coast to investigate my master's thesis topic, and the day before I came back home, my computer just crashed. My computer was dead. I did not worry at all because I had written down everything and I had worked only on the Dropbox. My fifth and last tip is to format your research well. Generally, I recommend going for the shortest, simplest, and clearest format you can. The best way to explain something complicated is with really simple words. Furthermore, I recommend using diagrams to explain and illustrate your findings, your insights, your ideas, your decisions. You can also use colors, bullet points, and other formatting tools to really visually highlight the most important information. A reader should really have no doubt as to what your research objectives are, what your findings are, and what they mean. There you go. All of this should help you have a more relaxed experience writing your master's thesis. I wish you all the best, and if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Bye.